and welcome to another episode of Earth911's Sustainability in Your Ear, the podcast conversation with a change maker working to accelerate the transition to a sustainable carbon neutral society. I'm your host, Mitch Ratcliffe. You know, there's a lot of momentum around sustainability in society, but millions of companies and billions of people are not engaged with the ideas and taking action. Many simply don't know where to start. We're joined today by Susan Hunt Stevens, co-founder and CEO of WeSpire, which develops tools, services, and informational campaigns that help companies improve their sustainability performance, their inclusivity, social impact, and employee well-being. Across the board, these programs are more important than ever as employees, especially younger ones, are looking for purpose and meaning in their work as the pandemic continues to disrupt life. WeSpire's programs have been used by companies with more than 2 million employees. The technology uses behavioral science to present goals, motivating information, and actions that employees can take to contribute to the organization's sustainability goals. But choosing those goals, deciding where to start, and understanding the best way to engage employees, partners, and customers in your mission, your sustainability mission, is the hard work that's just beginning for so many companies. It's an opportunity to reset not just environmental goals, but also the way your business shares information internally and externally, its role in the community, and much more. So let's talk about WeSpire's approach. You can learn more about WeSpire at www.wespire.com. That's WESPIRE, wespire.com. Welcome to the show, Susan. How are you today?
I'm good. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. And after our pre-interview conversation about everybody that we know in common, it's a pleasure to have you.
Long lost friends.
It's a funny thing. The world is smaller every day. And we're connected. Now, WeSpire is an interesting space. You know, corporate change. You launched the company in 2010. Before a lot of these converging forces began to really force a lot of change, did you see this coming when you started WeSpire?
On the corporate side, absolutely not. I wish I could tell you I was that prescient. I founded the company with a belief that we could use the best of interactive technology, things I was very familiar with based on my work at the New York Times on the digital side, game mechanics, social mechanics, content targeting, to close the gap for people and their own behavior in their personal lives. And I was passionate about sustainability personally, catalyzed by some health issues that my, at the time, 2-year-old was having. And there's this giant gap between people who want to live more sustainability and people who actually do it. It's about a 60 percentage point intent to action gap. And I was like, hey, I am really good at getting people to do things using technology. Let's see if I could take all those techniques and apply it to people's personal lives. I had gone back to grad school in sustainable design. I had seen the LEED system for green building, and the original vision was kind of a LEED for people, something that would motivate and inspire people. And so for the first 2 years, that's really where we focused at WeSpire. But a funny thing happened. We ended up on the Today Show and Earth Day 2011. And, you know, didn't end up with thousands and thousands of new users like you would have hoped, but we started getting a lot of calls from companies and companies asking if we had a version they could use with employees. You know, in a classic entrepreneur, the first 2, you're like, interesting. By the third one, you're thinking, maybe this is a trend and I need to pay a little more attention to these calls coming in. And sure enough, there was this early group of sustainability leaders who had set all these goals for 2020. And they'd done all the command and control, central decision-making things. And now we're really left with behavior and culture and needed help. And so we took what we built for people and we turned it over to the enterprise, and the rest is history.
Now, you know, I was reading in Nature Sustainability, there was a June 2022 research study about the United Nations Social Development Goals and the fact that they've led to what is described by the researchers as discursive, but not normative or institutional changes. In other words, people like to talk about this stuff, but doing it not so much, like you were just saying. How do we translate words into action? Tell us about how WeSpire, the mechanism works.
Yeah. So the mechanism for WeSpire's behavior change platform works on a model popularized by a gentleman named BJ Fogg at Stanford. And what it looks at is the ability to look at people's ability first and foremost. How do they actually change? Can they change? What are the barriers to those change from an ability standpoint? Because all the motivation in the world doesn't work if you're not able to do something. So you have to increase people's ability first and foremost. Then you have to increase the motivation. And there's all sorts of different ways to motivate people. Incentives are obviously what a lot of folks default to, but they're actually not necessarily as effective as social norms or recognition or, a sense of achievement, mastery, fun, all this other. So understanding what then, once people are able, motivates them. And when you can get people at the right place between ability and motivation, you have to bring in the third element, which is nudges and triggers at the right time and the right place to get people to do things. So in our context for WeSpire, we built all of those behavioral mechanics into the platform, all the game mechanics, social mechanics, all the targeting, all the nudges, all the triggers. The ability then comes with the content. And as I was sharing with you in advance, a lot of this is just helping people understand not just what to do, but how to do it.
Right.
And many sustainability leaders and corporations forget that people, their employees, are still at the beginning, not even sure what number 7 plastic is, let alone what to do with it, or things like that.
Oh, in fact, number 7 plastic is everything that was invented after the numbers 1 through 6, making it even more complicated. But it's funny. I remember BJ's work in the 90s when he was just starting to develop this stuff. But linking success and progress mentally, and this goes back to the comment about the nature study as well. Moving from aspiration to action in a sense of reward, because this is also a long process, and that's the challenge that a lot of companies have. Is we need to show results today, but it's hard to do that today. So what is your recommended strategy for launching a corporate training program? What do they need to think about doing internally before they even begin to externally communicate how they are making progress?
Absolutely. So the first step in a corporate environment is the materiality assessment. You have to understand in a 2x2 framework, not just what is material to the organization from an impact standpoint, but also from a business opportunities standpoint. But then you have to do the second piece, which is where a lot of organizations stop, is they get their materiality assessment, but they don't do this other piece, which is what are employees passionate about and what can they actually influence? Because what's material that employees can influence and are passionate about is a really important quadrant, because what happens is if it's highly material, but employees don't really care, it can create a very difficult to sustain initiative. But conversely, if employees are really passionate about something and there's not a big business case for it, it can get seen as an indefensible distraction. And you don't get then the corporate support that you need in terms of communications, first and foremost, and incentives, whether those are incentives in the recognition area or in the rewards area. And so one of the things we just really help companies do first and foremost is understand that 2x2. What are the actions and behaviors that are going to have a material impact that people can take in their role, because their roles may be different. And so in a pharmaceutical environment that's doing a lot of research, it may be about the researchers closing the hoods while they're doing the research. In a hospitality setting, it may be changing how the housekeepers are using water when they're cleaning the showers. That tendency had been in some of the hospitality companies we worked with in the early days that they would leave the water running while cleaning the rest of it. And so just changing that process, which is both awareness and then motivation to change that process, is a critical effort that you have to target to those housekeepers. And you don't need to distract the people who don't use the water with that effort.
So targeting the communications is an important thing, but do you
Targeting
find
what we call the campaigns. So we call them campaigns or competitions, but targeting the interventions might be even the more, scientific word around it. So it's really taking those interventions that are behavior based and pointing them at the folks who it's most relevant for.
are there interventions that are common, that are frequently high engagement opportunities that you would recommend people look at and begin with, because that's an easier route to initial success?
Yeah. So in an office environment, the vampire energy scavenger hunt is one of our most popular competitions and challenges. And so people form teams and they go run around an office environment looking for sources of vampire energy usage. That exists in every company. There's always things that you can change the default settings for. There's always things people learn in that about leaving plugs in the wall and how that actually, if you could make electrons red, you would have pools of red all over your desk by leaving it in. And people begin to get awareness. And so that's a mass opportunity. The other thing that we've learned that's really interesting is that some of the mass opportunities might not be highly material from a business standpoint or an impact standpoint, but if you don't address them, your employees don't think you're being authentic on your material things. And this is where we see that the interventions involving reusables in the cafeterias, better recycling, composting, all of that. There's organizations where that may not pop on their materiality assessment because the compressed air that they're using in a factory or the materials that they're trying to get out of a waste stream are so much more important. But if you don't address these things, employees are going to call you out. And so that's the other, Pause on Plastic has actually been one of the most successful global campaigns run by a number of companies, but spearheaded initially by J&J as part of their Ellen MacArthur plastic-free pledge, which was core to their business, but they knew they couldn't, focus on this from a business standpoint without bringing it to the office and bringing that as well for consistency reasons.
So that the absence of those maybe less material, but very visible activities creates a sense of hypocrisy.
Exactly.
People react to shutting down.
Yeah. And frustration, because employees are often passionate about the things they can see, and employees are often passionate about the things that they can do at home, but then can't do at work. And, the number of times we hear, I see the cleaning people sticking the recycling in the regular garbage, Now that building may have single stream and that may be the right way to do it, but they don't know. And so they say, I am working so hard at home to separate things. It makes me really mad when I'm at work that people aren't, and so there's this whether they call it hypocrisy or just this lack of congruence in the strategy that companies have to think long and hard about, because they really do. 50%, this is an incredible number, 58% of millennials have publicly called out their employer on social media for bad environmental practices.
I don't want to get stuck on the idea of hypocrisy or lack of authenticity, but this is really critically important, because the first move has to be internally. And before you can start to talk externally about the fact that you're making progress, you have to make these assessments and do everything that you just described. Now, you also just mentioned reducing manufacturing waste, for instance, in a pharmaceutical setting. How broad a range of activities does WeSpire have training or campaign material around? And does it reach across the entire spectrum, all the way down to managing delivery systems and all the logistics that go with it, and getting people to embrace the metaphors about the environment that make them think about sustainability as they're working?
Yeah. So WeSpire has over 350 programs available in our library that any of our clients can edit, modify, and use in their own environment, because you have to tailor it for your own environment and your own structure and your own groups. But the foundation is there, the framework is there, the content is there, and then it's there for editing. But we also have tools that enable companies to create custom campaigns from scratch and with all the behavior baked in. And we have a content team that will help them create custom campaigns. And the exciting part is when that custom campaign is created by that client, they have a choice. They can keep it private to themselves, or they can share it back into the library for other customers to take, edit, modify, and use. So that library is always growing. And so what tends to happen is when we get a client from hospitality, they might be the pioneers for hospitality related campaigns, but then every client who comes on who's in the hospitality space gets to benefit from battle tested things that have worked in another environment that often work in their environment. Not always. We do certainly learn that cultures are different, but that gives a great foundation. So we have yet to meet a industry that we can't be helpful with. The lift is sometimes harder for that first client in that first industry than it is for the follow-on.
The open source approach to the content is really important because industries need to change. It's not just one company. And it's great that they can actually share that because then these ideas propagate. Now, the other really interesting element for me was this sort of whole life approach that you're taking. You're not just addressing the employee as an employee, but you're saying these ideas can also be applied at home. And you also, a moment ago, pointed out that sometimes what happens at home is starkly different and for real reasons. How do you help people orient to transitioning from their work environment to their home environment with these ideas? And can they bring those ideas back into the library too?
So if the client gets to decide who can author campaigns and content, and we have some clients who keep that very tightly controlled, and we have some clients that have opened up to all employees. So it really is at a client level about how much they want to empower and, as we like to say, democratize the creation of the content and the campaigns and the events and things like that for employees. Where we see the most democratization is when they put the green teams or the Planet employee resource groups on with all their chapters and all globally, and then enable them to create campaigns and content, not only for each other, but then to publish out to others. So certainly we absolutely see that catalyzing at that level. In terms of the ratio between work and personal, I think every program has its own mix and its own flavor. Some companies start actually 100% personal for a lot of different reasons. But I think the most impactful programs are those that address whole life. And the reason is that there is a group of employees who's just getting started in their personal life, and they really see the fact the company's helping them. That could be with education, it could be with certain green incentives or perks or bonuses type things, as well as just the motivation and the recognition for doing things personally, that they really appreciate it. They see it as a benefit as opposed to one more corporate training thing, which is really interesting.
And that's how the normative approach propagates. You get people to make social norms, new social norms, that they, by sharing, changes not only the organization, but the people who are around the organization.
Absolutely. And if you think about the vast majority of sustainability actions, they're very invisible. I would have no idea that chicken is a locally grown, organic fed chicken versus a, industrialized chicken. If that chicken is just sitting in the cafeteria, it looks like chicken. And so by bringing visibility to many, many activities and actions that were invisible, whether at work or at home, you are bringing that social norming to a much more visible place internally, which enables two things that are really powerful. And you mentioned one of them. People change when their social network changes, and the workplace social network is a very powerful social network. But the other thing is often what stands in the way of change is just not knowing exactly what to do or how to do it. And so the storytelling from those employees who have adopted the behavior, because they can tell their story, they can show their pictures, they can answer questions around it. So there's the sort of formally written content, but then there's all the social content and storytelling around it. Becomes very, very powerful for increasing ability, one of the key aspects of driving behavior change. So you get this virtuous circle of professionally authored content combined with personal storytelling that makes taking the action not only more normative, but easier.
Yep. This is fascinating. We're going to take a quick commercial break and be right back with Susan Hunt-Stevens of WeSpire. We're back to continue talking with WeSpire co-founder and CEO Susan Hunt-Stevens about catalyzing climate and social action inside companies. So, Susan, one of the things that I found, and I work with companies on this kind of program as well, is that when setting goals and deciding how to talk about them, a company has to overcome a tension that exists between the sustainability team, who has, big ideas and a lot of goals they want to go after, and the culture of confidentiality, holding information close within the company. How do you get people to overcome that? Or are your clients generally past that challenge?
There's a spectrum within our clients, certainly. Those that are real leaders and setting, science-based targets, talking very publicly about the changes they are making, catalyzing their industry to address the system level problems that they're addressing. And then we have folks who won't say a thing, who are very quiet and very reticent to talk about what they are doing. And I think that gets back to just broadly, I've seen two, ends of how leaders work and how companies work. And one in sustainability specifically. And one is we are very comfortable setting a goal, knowing we have no idea how to hit it. Mm-hmm. Then there's the other, which is we will not set a goal until we know exactly how we're going to hit it. And that tension is, I think, what manifests externally as as when they're ready to talk. And, right. and I think that is just culturally a nuance of different organizations. I, of course, love the organizations that are willing to set the goal, having no idea how they're going to do it, because a lot of research shows that people will achieve what you expect. And if you expect great things, even if you fall short, you're going to get farther than if you didn't set that big, hairy, audacious goal to start. That's just sort of in the management wisdom. But I also totally understand, particularly for organizations who may have an Achilles heel that hasn't been solved yet around one of their core inputs or one of their core outputs or things like that, why they don't want to set a net zero goal when there is no way existing today to deal with that thing, because then it just looks like they're either setting themselves up for failure or, it's happy thinking. And so there's that tension, but we certainly see that the aspirational approach has led to extraordinary breakthroughs that if you would ask the companies we worked with at the beginning of the process, if they thought they would have been able to solve that problem, they said, we never would have expected to be able to solve it, but we did because we tried.
Well, you're really making an important point with the idea of being comfortable with the ambiguity of where we are today in terms of the journey to sustainability. No one knows how we're going to get there. I mean, a lot of people have strong ideas, but this raises an important point. You don't set a plan and just execute it. You have to evolve that plan constantly. How does WeSpire work with a client to continually assess and understand their environment, their corporate environment, and adjust and enhance the training and gamification that you're offering?
Yeah, so I think that was the magic sauce that coming out of the publishing industry, I kind of brought into this world, which is the technology evolved at one pace, but what we were pushing through that technology was changing 24/7 on nytimes.com and boston.com. So you need the infrastructure and the content publishing engine to be really, really good. But what you're pushing through it is going to vary all the time. And in fact, if it doesn't vary frequently, it gets stale, boring, and people stop participating. And so we've been able to work with companies for 10 plus years, driving their sustainability engagement programs. But what they're doing today, 10 years later, is completely different than what they were doing at the beginning. And the content and the campaigns have to evolve with where the organization is, where the priorities are, where the employee population is. And that may be very different globally. It might be very different based on even just different buildings and facilities.
Sure.
It may be different depending on how the technology has changed for actually addressing something. And so something you weren't able to put a program around 10 years ago, you might be able to now because the system infrastructure around the company has changed. So for example, 10 years ago, employees wanted composting in some cases, but
Right.
the facilities just didn't exist to support it. And that's changing.
So the other interesting component for me with a lot of the programs that I've been involved with is that as you bring new employees in, not only are you onboarding them to your sustainability program, but they bring insight and experience from other organizations. How does the WeSpire tool work to collect some of those insights and integrate them into the next phase of the company's programs?
Yeah, so one of our activity types, we have 5 different activity types, but one is called an idea board. And what it is the ability to put up any topic and to let employees share their ideas and thoughts on that topic. And then the other employees can vote if you want to set it up as a voting mechanism for those ideas. It was actually developed in partnership back in 2014 with Unilever for their monthly employee-based sustainability challenges. And they would put things that the teams were struggling to address up just to see what the wisdom of the crowds offered. And not every problem got solved that way, but a number did, which was really exciting to see. And so being able to activate the voice of the employee to share information, enable that to be conversational back and forth so people can ask questions of the person who submitted the idea. They can add links, they can add all of this. And then, you might get 1,000 ideas, but if of those 1,000 ideas, 5 have received more than 100 votes, there's a great way to focus.
Now, WeSpire also integrates some offset opportunities. And what I want to ask is the hard question is, do offsets encourage people? Is it a moral hazard that encourages people to continue to behave badly because they can offset it? What is your thinking about that? And I'm curious what you're.
So it's a relatively new addition to the platform. So we're still learning, and we have had a commitment to learning since day one. We will try anything and then see how it goes. The context in which it was offered is the following. So when the pandemic happened, and for many of our clients, there was this massive shift out of offices to a home environment. They had net zero or carbon neutrality goals. And so their scope 2 dropped, but it really didn't. It just shifted. Right. And in fact, the number is staggering. It's something like $9 billion worth of energy use went from corporations over to the employees.
Yep.
And our really authentic clients said, we need to understand that and do something about it. And so first and foremost, they just needed a way to measure it. So we added we think it's the first, broadly available global carbon calculator that really focuses on capturing the employee related scope 3 emissions in a good way. And that was first to just know what it was. Then we gave targeted campaigns to reduce it because that's the first thing. But then the question said, listen, in our corporate goals for us to hit carbon neutrality or net zero, we are all doing RECs or offsets or something like that. Would there be a way to help our employees learn more about what that means and what they are and how they do by enabling them or us to give money to them to offset their own footprint? And so that was the idea, is to use the process for 2 things. One is enable employee directed purchasing of offsets the company was going to buy anyway, but now they can do things that the employees are passionate about, often at a more local
so
level.
You're connecting to them rather than, that's an important point.
Yeah. So the idea is that it's highly educational, and while it's their own footprint, the employer can choose through rewards or through just distributing the funds out to the employees for them to then select, hey, I might be more passionate about preservation of koala habitat in Australia, whereas this other employee may be more passionate about women and cook stoves in sub-Saharan Africa. for the employer to learn what people are passionate about, to enable that level of choice and education, and to then be able to offset their employee footprint as part of their carbon neutrality or net zero strategy is sort of it's a win-win-win around the education front, around the activation front, and around hitting their goals front.
So let me take it back to that initial set of questions around how do we turn words into action? How do you think we're doing as a society, or at least let's say within the US economy, in terms of getting these ideas shared and getting them to start to evolve, rather than everybody getting a list of things we need to do because the future is not bright?
So if you look at the data, we're not doing well.
Mm-hmm.
And the data is ultimately what you have to look at, because we can't hold at 1.5 or less, then we're not doing what we need to do. The data right now is not good. And there has been a dramatic shift, in my experience, in the last 2 to 3 years.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's one of the benefits of having been doing this for 12 years, is that you see the ebbs and the flows, particularly here in the United States. Europe is way ahead. Yeah. Asia is catching up. The US is a laggard, has been, and it's changing. There is a lot that is happening, but it is not enough. And it is always a battle for the teams focusing on this inside the organization to get the resources, time, and attention that it's going to take for us to broadly catalyze and hit our goals. And so we're making progress, but we're not moving fast enough, and we're not leveraging the power that companies have nearly enough.
How can our listeners, if they're interested in getting their company to participate, get involved with WeSpire? What do they need to do?
So it's pretty easy. You can just come to wespire.com and request a demo. You can send me an email to susan@wespire.com. I would also encourage them to really look at organizations like Count Us In that have a broad spectrum and are starting to aggregate sort of the impact that folks are having collectively. So would love to help people who want to do this through WeSpire, but would also always encourage people to reach out to the consortiums that are catalyzing corporate action in very significant ways.
Well, Susan, I want to thank you for taking some time to talk with us today. It's been fascinating.
Thank you for having me.
We've been speaking with Susan Hunt Stevens. She's the co-founder and CEO of WeSpire, and you can find out more about WeSpire at www.wespire, no space, no dash, wespire.com, WESPIRE. This is Earth911 Sustainability in Your Ear. It's been another fascinating conversation. What we heard here is something that's very familiar to a lot of business people. We're in a very ambiguous situation. We don't necessarily know how we're going to solve the problem of becoming sustainable as organizations, but we do know that we have a commitment to doing it. Finding mechanisms, finding tools like WeSpire that help people connect their aspirations to actions and the rewards, that is the feedback that they're making progress, that help them keep going, is essential to how we design our organizations to become sustainable in the future. And there's a number of things that you can do here, but look for opportunities to aggregate your organization, your company's efforts with others, and Count Us In is an important one. Take a look at that. Susan mentioned it during the conversation, but it is like 1% for the planet, a consortium of companies making an effort together and publicizing what they're doing. It's going to activate everyone's awareness of the opportunity to and importance of becoming sustainable. We're going to be back soon with another innovator interview. We hope you'll take a few minutes to share these ideas and all the other podcasts that we've done with your friends, family, and of course, coworkers. Talk to your boss about this. Get them thinking about what they can do to change your organization for the better. More ideas will create less waste. This is Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. We're going to be back soon. In the meantime, folks, take care of yourselves, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet of ours. Have a green day.